The German submarine branch of the Kriegsmarine was one of the most fear-inducing branches of the German military apparatus during the Second World War. It wasn't always that way though. As a matter of fact, Adolf Hitler preferred to put emphasis on the Wehrmacht and Luftwaffe rather than the Kriegsmarine during the initial stages of the war. He simply didn't realize the potential of the U-boats against the Allied fleet. Admiral Karl Dönitz put a change to that. Within 2 months of the outbreak of the war, he launched a daring operation with merely one U-boat that would rapidly sway the minds of everyone involved in the Second World War. U-boats, from then on, would be a force to be reckoned with. Karl Dönitz started his career before the First World War in the German Kaiserliche Marine, or the Imperial Navy. During the war, his submarine, Unterseeboot in German, or U-boat for short, was sunk by British troops. He was briefly captured but released. By the time the Second World War broke out, he was the commander of the German submarine branch of the Kriegsmarine. His attention was focused on the Royal Navy's base at Scapa of the northern tip of Scotland. It held bitter memories for the German First World War veterans. At Scapa the Kaiserliche Marine had surrendered and sunk all their own vessels once they had done so. Now, at the beginning of the Second World War, the British housed many warships in the bay sheltered by its natural borders. They had placed their ships in a way that any exit of German boats into the North Sea would easily be intercepted. There was no way of any boat of the Kriegsmarine to sail onto the North Sea, let alone the Atlantic Ocean. France had not yet fallen, and until it had not fallen, the English Channel was simply off limits to the Germans. Obviously, the Germans were trying to see if there were openings in the British defenses of Scapa. Now, Dönitz was convinced that a submarine operating on its own would be able to not just penetrate Scapa-Flow's defenses, but deal a significant blow to the warship stationed there. He started mapping out the defenses using aerial reconnaissance and information gathered by the U-16. If he was able to pull off a mission such as this one, it would shift the focus of German funds and expansion of its military towards the submarine branch of the Kriegsmarine, not to mention the incredible propaganda potential. There were rows of sunken block ships and anti-submarine nets in order to prevent any attack around Scapa, but the information Dönitz received confirmed his suspicions. There was a row of inadequate sunken block ships on the eastern entrance. There was a gap in this row, and a surface submarine would be able to sail over the obstacle and break into the harbor. The mission would have to be carried out at night, but it might just be risky enough to succeed. Just like we have seen last week with Michael Wittmann, the greatest tank ace of the Second World War, for this mission too, a man was handpicked that would eventually skyrocket to fame in Nazi Germany. It was a 31-year-old Günther Prien that was going to lead Dönitz's dangerous mission. Prien had been credited with the first submarine victory of the war on September 5, 1939, and would continue to serve as eager propaganda material for the Nazi propaganda machine. Eventually he upped his tally of sunk Allied ships to 31. On October 8th, the U-47 with Prien as its commander sailed from Kiel into the North Sea. Prien commanded a 44-man strong crew that slept during the day and awoke at night. Reason for this was that during the day the submarine would remain submerged deep into the sea, and at night would surface in order to sail closer to its objective. During these few days, only Prien was aware of the objective they were tasked with. The crew simply followed orders. 4 days after it set sail, the submarine reached the Scottish Orkney Islands. During the night, they observed the situation, and Prien finally assembled the crew and told them what their mission was. They were going to enter Scapa and wreak havoc on the British warship stationed there. Torpedoes were armed and prepared for firing, and scuttling charges were fit around the submarine. The Germans remembered what happened to their Imperial Navy during the First World War, when the admirals ordered the fleet at Scapa to be scuttled. It would be a desperate last measure in case the mission would go wrong, but considering the risk, it certainly could go wrong. They identified the location where gaps were in the sunk block ships, and they made ready to launch their mission. On October 14th at 7 p.m. the sun was slowly lowering and Prien, together with 2 petty officers, looked on from the conning tower. It seemed highly unlikely that they would not be spotted. The northern lights cast a bright glow all over Scapa flow. A mission was a mission, however, and Prien ordered the submarine to stay surfaced and slowly sail over the sunk block ships. As they sailed over the block ships, a cable attached to one of the block ships caught onto the submarine, and a scraping noise polluted the otherwise silent bay. Fortunately, the submarine managed to tear itself free and continued its course without being noticed, and as they reached the harbor, Prien saw some silhouettes of ships, but not of the capital ships. All there was the anchored, aging HMS Royal Oak, a second-line battleship that served in the First World War. Prien spotted the Royal Oak at 1 a.m. The seaplane tender Pegasus was behind it, with Prien convinced it was a battleship repulse. Realizing there was no threat of other British vessels, Prien ordered the submarine to fire. 3 torpedoes were shot, 2 at the Royal Oak and 1 at Pegasus. After 4 tense minutes, one of the torpedoes hit the bow of the Royal Oak. The battleship was hit and shook after a loud bang had alerted the crew. At least you'd think so, but on board the majority of the 1,400-strong crew initially thought it was a small internal explosion without reason to worry. Prien ordered his submarine to quickly leave, but realizing there was no response, at least not a response he'd expected, the torpedo tubes were reloaded. On board of the Royal Oak, most of the sailor crew had returned to their slumber, and 12 minutes later Prien ordered the submarine to fire its second salvo, and this salvo meant the end of the Royal Oak. The first torpedo hit the starboard side under the B turret of the ship. The other 2 torpedoes hit several seconds later. The 32,000-ton warship nearly levitated and was lifted out of the water. Panic broke out on board. Its crew now realized they were under attack. The explosions of the torpedoes cut all power from the ship, and its communication systems had been destroyed. Hundreds of sailors, including boy seamen, were trapped below the deck by fires and jammed power-operated hatches. Within 10 minutes, the Royal Oak turned turtle. With it, 833 sailors drowned, including over 100 under 18 boy seamen. The desperate cries for help and chaos on board stood in stark contrast with the sereneness aboard the German submarine, where the atmosphere was one of relief and even pride. Against the current, Prien and his crew now set sail back to their harbor. The U-47 once again sailed over the block ship and managed to twist itself through the narrow channel out into the North Sea. Sailing several hours, once they were safe, Prien took out a crate of beer for the crew to celebrate. They succeeded in their mission. The Nazi propaganda would blow their feet up to epic proportions. And more importantly, Dönitz's underseaboat branch was finally put on the map as a very competent asset against the Allied fleet. On the 17th of October, the U-47 reached Wilhelmshaven, with the only obstacle being a Royal Navy minesweeper that they managed to evade without too much trouble. Admiral Dönitz gave the crew a hero's welcome. All of them were awarded the Iron Cross Second Class. Günther Prien was awarded the Knight's Cross by Adolf Hitler, in person. Thanks to Prien and his crew, Dönitz was now able to increase his Unterseeboot branch in numbers and equipment, and by 1943 it was operating with a strength of 300 vessels. They nearly won the Battle of the Atlantic and certainly proved an annoyance, if not near annihilation, of Britain's vital Atlantic supply line. As for Günther Prien, he did not enjoy his hero status and victories for too long. Now, there is no official record of what happened to the U-47. It went missing in March 1941 as it was attacking an Atlantic convoy. The British destroyer HMS Wolverine is assumed to have sunk the U-47 with all its 45 crew members on board, including Günther Prien. 8 of the crew were veterans of the mission at Scapa Flow. Now taking their moment for revenge, the British propaganda broadcast to Germany, "Wo ist Prien?" or "Where is Prien?", as Germany did not want to acknowledge his death at first due to the loss of face. Although he came to an early grave at 33 years of age with less than 12 months at sea, Günther Prien stands among the top submarine commanders of the Second World War, having sunk 31 enemy vessels. And that is the story of one of the greatest U-boat commanders of the Second World War. It certainly was one of the most daring missions at the outset of the war. Thank you for watching this video. I would also like to thank all my patrons for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and want to support my work, consider checking me out on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you will gain access to the exclusive Patreon series. If there is a person or event from the Second World War that you would like to know more about and perhaps see a video of, let me know your thoughts in a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.